Hey everyone, welcome to my podcast, Inside Equine Minds, where I, Caitlin Hendry, meet with various horse professionals, trainers, riders, grooms, to dive deep inside the minds of the most successful horses in various disciplines. I'll take you behind the scenes from the horse's perspective to learn about how these horses are trained and managed in a way that strengthens their mental game and has fueled their massive success. This podcast is brought to you by EQPI, or Equine Performance Identities, a personality profiling tool for horses that guides people to becoming the partner their horse actually needs. We all want our horses to be a happy and willing partner and to enjoy spending time with us. An EQPI profile gives you the information about your horse's individual needs and motivations so you can adapt the way that you're working with them to ensure just that. And should we decide that we're just not the best person for our horse or circumstances lead us to having to sell or lease, EQPI is a great tool for sharing what your horse's temperament is to ensure they do get a good match with their next person. Or maybe you love your horse so much that you want more of them and you decide that you want to breed. An EQPI profile provides invaluable information about temperament, so you can really make sure you're looking at the full picture when you're choosing the best stallion or mare for your horse. Our featured horse in today's episode is Rincoola Milsean, who is known by Roy around the barn. He is a 2013 Irish sport horse gelding who is owned by North Star Sport Horses, which is the home of recent Nations Cup champion Charlotte Jacobs, who is also his rider and also my guest today. Charlotte and Roy had a killer year in 2024. They started by being fourth in a meter 50 5-star class during USEF 5. Then they went to Kentucky Invitational and they won the Welcome Speed Cup. And then they were third in the $225,000 Grand Prix there. Then at Thunderbird Show Park in Canada, they were second in the qualifier and then they won the 4-star Grand Prix. Then at Traverse City Fall Horse Show, they won the 3-star Welcome Stake and won the $120,000 Grand Prix. And they ended the year at the American Gold Cup being second in the 5-star qualifier. So all of this kind of led up to them being the 2024 USEF Reserve Grand Champion jumper, second only to Kent Farrington and Greya. And if you know that pair, you would say that Roy and Charlotte truly had a standout year. I mean, they did amazing. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Roy is only 15 hands, and as a little person myself, of course, I have to root for the little guy. So he is a little guy, but he has a ton of personality, and so I'm excited to talk with Charlotte about Roy's personality and how that has impacted his success as one of the top jumpers in the US. But before we do, a quick overview of Roy's EQPI personality profile. So in order to get Roy's profile, Charlotte went online and she took the EQPI input survey, which is available on our website, www.equineperformanceidentities.com. Using Charlotte's inputs, I then analyze and figure out where Roy falls on 4 spectrums of behavior that EQPI measures. These spectrums are independence, which is the horse's preference to control or comply; extroversion, which is the horse's preference to interact or isolate; stability, which is the horse's preference for predictability or variety; and then structure, which is the horse's preference for clarity and flexibility. In addition to determining where Roy falls on each of these spectrums, I also then look at how his spectrums relate to each other. And this is really what gives the nuances of the individual personality profiles of each horse. So let's dive into Roy's profile. For the independent spectrum, Roy is very high, which means that he likely prefers more autonomy. He likes to probably make his own decisions. High independence horses also usually care more about what's in it for them, and particularly from a mental challenge standpoint, they like to sort of figure out puzzles, I guess you can say, and keep their brain stimulated. Roy is also very high extroversion, and high extroversion horses are more playful, more curious, more expressive. And so it's usually much easier to read their sort of emotions because they tend to be better communicators because they communicate out loud and they share what they're feeling instead of sort of keeping it to themselves and retreating internally. For the stability spectrum, Roy is considered low, and low stability horses, movement is more important to them. They also tend to like more variety, and so keeping him busy, and especially with that high extroversion and the high independence, keeping him sort of mentally stimulated, not necessarily trying to wear him out, but just keeping his mind engaged. Low stability horses also tend to be more sensitive to energy, and so they will react differently depending on who's sort of around them and the environment around them. For the structure spectrum, Roy is very high, and high structure horses, they like a lot of clarity. They like to know things in very sort of simple black and white terms because they don't like risk. And so really making sure that you're breaking it down, you're giving them clear expectations. They don't like to be wrong. That's part of that mitigating risk element. And so making things very clear when they're doing something right and making things sort of fail-proof. Now diving into the relationships of the spectrums in Roy's profile. Roy's independence is considered higher than his low stability spectrum. And when we see this relationship, these horses tend to be more proactive in their thinking. They're more forward thinkers because of that high independence and wanting to make their own decisions. And then the faster pace of the low stability, they're sort of always thinking ahead and very sort of busy minded. And this is sort of exacerbated by his high extroversion also being higher than his low independence. So I mentioned that high extroversion horses are more playful and get bored, and this is especially true when the stability is lower than the extroversion. In addition, when it comes to social relationships with horses or people, when the extroversion is higher than the stability, they do tend to be more quick to connect. They don't hesitate as much to interact with new people or new horses. They tend to be more sort of in your face, especially because he has that braveness from his high independence. The other significant relationship that we'll talk about in Roy's profile is the fact that his low stability is lower than his high structure. And when we see this relationship in horses, they are more careful with rules. So Roy will want to be a rule follower. These horses usually also do better in a program that sort of fits in with the rules as far as knowing what to expect and meeting those high structure needs, and then having a sort of regular outlet for that variety and the energy of the low stability. If you want to see Roy's ECBI profile, it is available on the Inside Equine Minds Patreon account, as well as all of the other horses that are featured on this podcast if you want to see those profiles as well. If you want a profile for your own horse, again, you can find the input survey on the ECPI website, www.equineperformanceidentities.com. All right, now we all have the same understanding of Roy's ECPI profile. Let's bring Charlotte in and talk about his personality and how it actually shows up in the day-to-day and how Charlotte works with him. Hey, Charlotte, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I like to start pretty much every episode with a nice, easy question around what you sort of enjoy the most. So for Roy's personality, what aspects do you really value the most?
He's so different than any other horse I've ever had in my life, and still very different than any other horse I have currently. He really likes to do his own thing. He likes to, have his people and his own program. And I feel like he knows he has that, and he knows that he's sort of special. Not sort of special, he is special. And I love how competitive he is. I mean, he wants to win just as much as I want to win. He has such a great attitude in the ring. I tell everybody because they said everybody always says to me, "Oh, he looks like so much fun," and I was like, he is so much fun in the ring, but he can be just a terror at home. He's like a naughty toddler. Like he just knows when he can get away with things. He knows when he doesn't have a very important day. He bites, but like not in a mean way. It's more of like a love bite, but also is just sassy and knows he can get away with everything. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I love about him. He's so unique. If you've seen photos of him or videos of him, he's about 15 too. Like he's very
He's a
small
little guy, yeah.
little, but I mean, when I bought him, I never thought he was going to do the things he's done, and he's just like continued to surpass all of my expectations. So yeah, I mean, he's so different, so unique.
Unique in what ways?
I just think, I think if you see a smaller horse, he's not conventional. He goes with his head in the air. He doesn't enjoy standard flat work. He wants to be able to just do things his way. Almost every single one of the horses I have to flat before I show, usually 30, 45 minutes, depending on the horse. But with him, the more when you're at the horse show, the more you just leave him alone, the better he is. And I've never had a horse like that. And it took a while to get used to and to sort of trust. But the more I did start to trust that and trust his own sort of thing, then it just got better and better. When we're at the shows, I usually ride him the first day and then going through the week before a Grand Prix or before a big welcome class or anything, he just lunges and he rolls in the dirt every single time. So yeah, I mean, that was definitely a little bit strange in the beginning, but now people, I think when he's out in FEI and he's lunging and people see him roll, everybody thinks it's hysterical because it's like just so different than everybody else, all of my other horses. But yeah, no, he goes in a different way. He has a little bit of a smaller stride. So that took a little bit of getting used to. I was always adding, learning how to add in lines and add in jump offs, but still be fast. It was something that I really had to adjust in my riding. But now that I have, it's like we really understand each other and we have such a good relationship. So yeah.
So, on the flip side of that, then, what trait of Roy's do you find the most difficult to manage?
I think, he's a horse with a lot of energy and a lot of blood. And sometimes for me, that's a little bit hard, but I also think, it is a positive in ways when you're at home and you're trying to just get him to switch off and you just, want to take him and have a nice day flatting or take him for a trail ride. He enjoys it, but sometimes it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
But again, it was something that I had to get used to, and it's something that now I am used to. And there's some days when you're riding him and he has so much energy that you're like, this horse is just better trotting up and down the road or going for a trail ride or going out twice a day, spending the day in the paddock, those sort of things. You can't just come out every day and go to the ring and try to flat him because it won't work for him. But yeah, I mean, that was difficult. I think in the beginning, he was very strong-minded. I got him when he was 8 years old. He really had his ways and he was really stuck to his ways. And I struggled with that a little bit in the beginning. But now as we've built our relationship, he's 12 now, so that was 4 years ago. It's gotten so much better. So yeah, I mean, there's not really many negatives to him, in my opinion. When I think of him, I just think of, what a fantastic horse he is. So
Right. Yeah. And I really do believe that there's no good or bad personality,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
a personality trait that is a challenge in one area can be a strength in another. And
Yeah.
so it's just finding the right ways to sort of manage it and create the environment where that challenge becomes a strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also with horses like him, it's really important to build that relationship. And I think right now we have such a positive relationship and we really understand each other. I understand when he's feeling his best or maybe he's feeling a little bit off that day and how to sort of change my ride to make him, feel more confident or feel better. And then having a groom work for him basically the entire time he's been with us is also really helpful because he understands him and he understands his quirks and he can tell me what mood he's in when I walk into the barn every day, which I find interesting. Yeah, so I think he has a lot of people around him that I think now he trusts, and I think that's just made him thrive.
Trust is a big element for high structure horses because they like things to be very clear and very black and white. And when things have a lot of ambiguity or a lot of lack of clarity, they don't like that. So having the consistent people and the consistent routine, especially because his structure is higher than his stability spectrum, and those horses are more rule oriented. You mentioned when you first got him, he's kind of stuck in his way, and it took a bit of time to adapt to that. So yeah, I'm hearing a lot of that come through.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense for him, but he's also, for me, he's taught me a lot about getting to know other horses and how to figure out their quirks. And so he's been really helpful to me and just, really trying so many different, if I'm having a hard time understanding another horse that I just got, taking that time and sort of going through what I went through with him to understand their personalities and to understand that, what they like and what they don't like. So yeah, he's been helpful across the board for me. And I think for everybody around us. So yeah, he's really just like the heart of our barn, which is nice.
Yeah, I saw in multiple places, like your website said that he is the cartoon character, and then I saw a Chronicle article about him. It's just
yeah, he's honestly he's hysterical. Like I think he looks like a cartoon character. He's got this like really distinct face, and he has this giant forelock, and he's sort of like he's not like pudgy, but he's sort of like big boned in ways, but he's small.
right.
And so I just look at him and I'm like, you literally look like you're in a cartoon. I don't know why. And the way he goes and his ears flop back and forth and his forelock, I mean, he's hysterical. So yeah, he cracks me up.
So you said it took a while to kind of figure out his quirks and how to work best with him. So from a riding perspective, what tips would you suggest to somebody else for like how to best ride him and bring out the best in him in the arena?
Yeah, I think taking it slow was the best thing I could have done with him. I have a lot of belief in my own program, and I think every rider should have that. I always say, like with a horse, like at least give it 6 months to a year to really understand them. If it happens before that, like great. And if it doesn't, then at least give them a year because when they're 8, they are almost developed. And so they've had sort of this structure before that maybe now you're changing. And with him, who's a horse that really likes structure, when he came into our program, it was probably a bit different. And it was definitely different. And so I had to give him that time to really understand like what I was asking him to do. Yeah, I think be patient, really try to understand your horse, understand what makes them tick. He's a horse that at home we don't really jump at all. We jump him maybe twice before he goes to a show, but he jumps max 130. Like we never jump him over that. But that's him and that's what he needs, where maybe another horse needs to jump a little bit bigger so they know they're going to a big show.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that he needs that approach?
He thrives off of confidence because he is a small horse. So the smaller you keep the jumps at home or schooling, the more he goes in the ring and he's like, this is easy. This feels easy. And whenever he jumps a really big class, he then steps back down and he jumps a 130 just so he feels like it feels really, really easy again. And it feels like, oh, I can do this. I can. And then he goes into, a 150 or 155 class, 160, whatever it is. And he's like you want him to sort of feel like he's like a lion, like he's going in and he's like, I can do this. And he needs to feel confident. He needs to feel brave. That took a while again. So it was the first year that I had him, I remember we were trying to school him at home, just, like we were doing in the ring. We were trying to jump a 140 if I was going to jump a 140. And we were starting to figure out like he's always easiest in the ring. So let's just keep him fit at home and then he can go in the ring and just do his thing and he'll be fine. And even in the warm up, we never jump big. We never jump a big wide oxer. We don't jump a tall vertical or anything like that. He just keeping him confident and letting him go forward and making sure he's happy. Even in the warm up, sometimes he like just wants to stand and just stand in the corner and be by himself and have some quiet time. And we just let him do that. And it's the same thing when he goes in the ring. If he wants to stand and just have a moment, he's allowed to have a moment. So yeah, I think it's just figuring out what makes them happy, because at the end of the day, you can't force a horse to jump because they have to want to do it. And he's taught me that a lot. I think being patient and just figuring them out is the biggest thing I can say.
Yeah. And what would happen if you didn't do those things?
He gets anxious and he gets nervous and you can just feel it. He'll walk like 100 miles per hour. And if you just let him stand, he really switches off and he just sort of looks around and looks and maybe gets a treat or something just to calm him down. Because he has a lot of blood, he has a lot of energy. But if you sort of force him through his ticks, I guess, then he just gets more and more anxious and that affects how he performs in the ring. So I've tried that way. Like when I first got him, I was like, why does this horse keep stopping? Like why not stopping at the jump, but just sort of parking in a corner and just wanting to like have a moment? He'll actually like take a big deep breath.
That's so cool that he learned to like regulate himself that way.
He does completely. Like he's really clever and he does relax himself. And I think the more I can stay relaxed on him too, the more he just eases his way into, the show ring. So the more it's like not a big deal, there's no drama around him going to the ring, the more relaxed he is. And that means he's going to perform well.
I think the mental aspect is more important for horses with Roy's sort of personality because of the high structure, they need a lot of clarity. But then with their low stability, these are pretty high energy horses, right? Like you're not going to wear them out. So in order to sort of manage that energy, and he's also high extroversion, which they're very expressive and get bored easily and curious. And so it's not about just lunging or riding until they get tired. It's more about helping them, especially with that high structure, helping them feel like the risk is mitigated and they have a clear program that they can fall back on. They know what to expect, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's really, it is really how he is. Like he is one that gets like very, very bored. And so when we're working with him, like he's always having to do different things. Like we have to take him down the road and work him on back in trail rides and over by the canals and making sure his mind is just always busy. He, as much as he can be out of the stall, the better it is. I mean, like I said, he can't have the same thing every single day, but he needs to know like, okay, I do X, Y, Z, and this makes me feel good. So if he has any sort of like change in his program, he gets stressy. That goes for like how he gets to the ring, how he prepares for the ring, how he prepares for a big horse show. He's funny because a lot of horses, before a big competition, you have to focus on their flat work and really getting them riding how you want to, where with him, he just needs to go on a lunge line, do his thing, be happy. He actually rolls every time he goes out on the lunge before a big class. And if that gets changed at all, it really throws him off. So he is like dependent on, his structure and his schedule. So I think that was the only thing that was a little bit different. But I guess he is independent in ways that he acts very differently than other horses. So it sort of could go both ways.
Yeah, I think what we're noticing or what you're kind of pointing out in the areas where he is more dependent is when his high structure needs are not being met. And it's like somewhere new or he's asked to be doing something new and he doesn't, there's like more risk involved there, or he doesn't know the right answer, or his program is changed. And then,
that would make sense. I mean, that is so him, and like he has his people, like he has my husband who's manages everything, and then my groom Paolo, who has sort of been the only one that's ever taken care of Roy, and they're very dependent on each other. And then he has me, and so we have such a good structure and such a good program with him now that he knows, like, okay, this is an important day, or okay, I'm having a little bit more of a lax day. So he's a very clever horse, and he really understands when he needs to be switched on, which I find really interesting about him.
Yeah.
Most of the time when he's at home, he actually he goes out into the paddock straight in the morning by himself. He eats his breakfast out there. He has his sort of morning routine, and it's really helped him, and it's helped us understand other horses too. Like I said, I have another horse that came that was a little bit high strung, and I was like, give him toys in a stall to play with, make sure he's out, make sure he's, going for trail rides down the road here in Wellington and around the farm up in New York, and have him out twice a day, make sure he's out grazing, make sure he just keep them as busy as possible. And that horse sort of had the same positive reaction to it that Roy did. So
yeah, busy, but not necessarily in a hectic way, right?
No.
Just a lot of variety.
Yeah, it's never hectic. And I give a lot of credit to the grooms that I have, because they do keep everything very calm, always. They're never really running late. They're always on time. They give a lot of attention to their horses. So I'm very lucky in that sense that that I have that sort of structure around the horses. So it's good.
So we've sort of talked about how you prep him for shows. We talked a bit about how you manage him around the farm and different things for riding him. I am just really curious, when you take him out on trail rides, do you always take him by himself or with other horses?
He does both. He's weird. He's not dependent on other horses at all. He is independent as a horse. Like I said, like he can be in the paddock by himself without any other horses around. He can go on trail rides by himself and not feel stressed about being away. He never makes noises. He makes noises at other people more than he makes noises at screaming back and forth with horses.
What do you mean?
Which you walk in the barn and he whinnies.
Oh, okay.
He wouldn't whinny at another horse.
Gotcha.
So I found that interesting.
Yeah. When you're on the trail ride with another horse, does he prefer to lead?
Yeah, always.
I think that's a high independence thing. I think that's where the competitiveness comes in, because with people, if they're high independence, they tend to be very competitive. But I'm always like, I don't know if horses understand the concept of competitiveness. But then think about trail riding, and some really like to be in front. And so I'm like, well, maybe they do. I don't know.
I think he has a full understanding of competition. He is competitive, and he does if he's walking with someone, he usually just sort of strolls along, especially if you're at home. And if a horse comes up, he's always has to be ahead of them. It's really funny. So yeah, that makes sense for independence.
Yeah, it's interesting. For the discipline question, I always love to get a sense of how the horse's personality sort of aligns with the discipline. And you mentioned that he's not conventional at all when it comes to being a jumper. He's really small. He goes around with his head up. He has a shorter stride. I mean, that all kind of leads to the fact that conformation and it is not always the determining factor for how successful a horse is going to be. So personality and heart and desire has a big play in a horse's success. And so how do you feel like Roy's personality has helped or hindered, or just how does it relate to being a jumper?
It's funny because somebody asked me a few weeks ago, what do you look for when you're looking for a horse? And one of the first things that I said was a good brain. And he has a weird brain, but he has a really good brain. And he's so confident, and he has so much belief in himself. So he has a great brain, and he has a great balance, and he wants to do it. And I think when you have a horse that wants it and has that heart for it, there's nothing better, in my opinion. I mean, you can have a horse with all of the ability, but if they don't have the heart to do it, they're not going to do it, because like I said before, you can never make a horse do this sport. They have to want it, and they have to want it as much as you do. And so, yeah, I think now it's really sort of changed the way I look at, when I'm looking for a new horse or when I have a young horse. When you feel that, And I remember trying him. I was just like, this horse feels like he can do anything. I mean, he came off the truck and he was, like a pony, and he doesn't go to the wash stall, and he had all these funny little quirks. But I was like, but you get on him and he's like, he wants it and he wants to do it and he has the heart for it. So I think it's being shown more and more and more in this sport now too, in show jumping. Maybe horses that are built differently look different than the sort of stereotypical proper show jumpers are making it to the top of the sport. So yeah, heart and brain and like I said, he has great balance.
What do you think he likes about jumpers?
I mean, I think he is a competitor at the end of the day too. I think he enjoys what he does. I do think he likes the reward of it too. He has people around him when he comes out of the ring, and they pet him and they give him attention and he gets treats. I do think he enjoys that part of it too. But yeah, I mean that's actually a tough question.
If I were going to look at his profile, I would think because he's low stability, it gives him the opportunity to really get moving. Like movement's really important to him. And then high structure horses, they are usually very careful, same, especially if they're also high extroversion, because the high extroversion makes that carefulness really expressive. So that's when they like jump really big and they tuck their
Yeah,
knees.
Yeah. That's very much him. He's freaky careful. That's the way we always describe it with him, and that's sort of the reason why we have to give him that confidence of dropping him down and jumping smaller tracks, is because he is so careful. When I'm at home, I barely do like, canter pulls, none of that, trot pulls, none of that, because he is so careful and he overthinks it that you could like create a problem in a way. So with him keeping it really simple, sort of the simpler the better, to be honest. Yeah, so that would definitely align with him. He's freaky careful. He's very expressive, as you can see from his videos and his photos. So
from a nature versus nurture perspective, I always find this question fascinating because we don't really know where personality comes from. So in your experience, which do you feel has the most impact on personality development of a horse? Do you feel like a horse is born with their personality as it is, or do you think their personality is developed over time through their environment and experiences?
I think it's more nurture. I do think horses, depending on their environment, I think their personalities can change depending on where they came from before. His personality has definitely changed, whether it's developed here or whether it was always there and it just came out. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, what did you mean it changed?
Like he got more friendly. He was way friendly. Like he was friendly with people when he came, but he's gotten extremely friendly with people. But he's also gotten this little bit of attitude. It's sort of like a bit of a sass, like he'll nip at you and all of that, but it's not in a bad way. But that he was a little bit shy when he came. So he would sort of stand in the back of his stall. He would just come out to eat. He would eat his hay. He wouldn't, like I said, with the sort of nickering at people, he would never do that. That started probably a year after we had him. And he started, sort of chatting. I say he chats because he's making noise all day. See, that sort of came out over time. And I don't know if that was always there or it was something maybe we spoiled him a little bit and that's why he's like that now. But I don't know. That is an interesting question.
Yeah, I think probably some of it's his high structure too. He does have a very social profile, I will say that. But the high structure can sometimes dampen that a bit because of the trust aspect of high structure, even though he's high extroversion and low stability and high independence, which those three usually mean that the horse is self-confident and confident in meeting new people or new horses. They're not hesitant to want to go say hi. They're more sort of in your face about it. But with the high structure, it can add some sort of skepticism in it a little bit.
Yeah.
Has anyone, I know Paolo's been his groom since you've had him. Has anyone else ever had to groom for him for one reason or another? And if so, what does he do?
We've had someone step in. He just like took over. He just like completely charged over her, trying to walk to the ring and walking home from the ring. I found he felt really different. I know that might sound weird, but
It like he felt stronger
he
or
felt stronger. He felt anxious. And so he felt very like uneasy. I think it was just we were at a horse show and Paolo stayed home for the weekend and I brought a different groom. Yeah, that was the last time we did that because she was like, I don't want to take this horse to the ring anymore. So I was going to go back and, get on him at the barn and ride him up to the ring and ride him, which was, fine. But he has his ways and he doesn't want to deter from them, which I understand. So
yeah. I think that was some of because of his high structure wasn't being met. Like it was a change, right? Something new.
Yeah.
I feel like his high independence and low stability took over. I find that if a horse's needs are not being met in one area, it sort of amplifies their needs in other areas. So if his structure is not being met, then he's going to lean on his high independence to try to get control or feel control over the situation because he doesn't have that clarity from his original sort of program.
Yeah. And it really just one little thing and he really, it sends him off. And I get that because I'm a little bit like that too. And so I think we understand each other because of that. Yeah. So the more structure we can have for him, usually the better the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And going back to the nature versus nurture conversation, I think that the behaviors that we observe can change based on whether or not we're meeting the needs of the horse's personality. Where if a horse feels like they can just be who they are and they're not going to get in trouble and, whatever, like they're going to feel more confident and not, be afraid that, oh, if I, playfully nip at somebody that I'm going to get really yelled at. Obviously there's a line there, but not encouraging all our listeners to let their horses bite them. But
no. There's two different types of bites, and he's not biting to be mean. He's sort of like we call it love nips. So it's not. I mean, it's never going to really hurt you. But the first Grand Prix he ever won, we were in Aiken, South Carolina, and my groom Paolo was taking care of him always, and he always gets a treat when he comes out of the ring, and he went to go get a treat and he had his finger out and he got the top of his finger from, his knuckle up sort of. And he was like, Charlotte, my finger's stuck. And he wouldn't let go, but it wasn't in a bad way. It was just sort of like resting on the top of his finger.
And he just holds on.
And he was just holding on to him. And we were just walking. And he was like, it's fine. And I was like, it's not fine. And so he eventually just let go. And Paolo was crying. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he bit you. It was like, no, I'm just so happy that he won his first Grand Prix. Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, that's sort of how he acts, but he was feeling a bit cocky that day, I think. He does do naughty sort of things, but like you were saying, like he is in your face, and he's in your face with the people that he knows. And say he's out for a hand walk and he sees another horse, he's sort of gonna charge over and be like, hey, hi, I'm Roy, nice to meet you. That's sort of his way about himself. So I mean, it definitely, everything that was in his profile lines up to the way he acts.
If this conversation has inspired you to learn more about your own horse's individual needs and motivations, you can get an EQBI profile at our website, which is www.equineperformanceidentities.com. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and thought the content was interesting, I would love if you could share it with anyone else who you think would feel the same. I'd also really appreciate if you could take a quick minute to give this podcast a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes about the top horses in hunters, jumpers, equitation, dressage, eventing, reining, cutting, there's probably more that I'm forgetting, but make sure you click that follow button too. Well, thanks for listening to me, Caitlin Hendry, and I hope you tune in to the next episode of Inside Equine Minds.